All right, it is 10 o'clock. Welcome, everybody, to the COVID-19 virtual Mayor's Town Hall. I'm Ryan Arnold from Easthampton Media. I'm going to be moderating today. And we're going to mute your microphones until the end when you will be able to ask questions, or you can go down into the chat and ask questions in between. All right? So with that, I will give it to Mayor Nicole LaChapelle.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our virtual town hall. A lot has happened over the last week with different health orders and just health data. I've asked our health agent, Bree, to join us to kind of walk us through the big changes. I know there are a lot of questions. I have a couple of questions myself that I got on email that I'll ask at the end, but really encourage everybody at the town hall to ask questions as well. If there are other things that I can answer or Bree can answer outside of what's being presented, happy to do that. I must, before I hand it over to Bree, got to give her more than a little props. You know, she has been handling the pandemic and just writing and making great health orders and decisions for Easthampton. She's a true partner to the city and all the department heads. I rely on her literally for any move I make regarding the pandemic to just get really great information. And I know more and more she's becoming a resource for our region. So that said, drum roll. Bree, if you could walk us through what's happened over the last week.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'm going to first start off with going over masks and where we're at with that and how you can request one still, the status of our Board of Health orders, and then go over kind of what's happening with the state reopening. So it's a lot of info. So if you want to just interrupt at any point, I don't want to get too carried away with it all at once. So masks, we did a drive-through mask giveaway last weekend, which was super successful. We gave away 1,780 masks and 160 children's masks. If you weren't able to make it, we still are offering contact-free delivery, thanks to Council on Aging, who's delivering for us. And a shout out to Jackie, our admin in our office, who is taking all of the requests and logging them and packaging them and getting them ready for Council on Aging. So it's a lot of work. So if you need a mask still, you can call our health office at 529-1400 extension 430 and just give me your name, your address, how many, if it's adults, children, and where to leave them. So mailbox, front porch. Or you can email me at health@easthamptonma.gov. And deliveries go out Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So if you put in a request Monday morning, you might not get it until Wednesday, but those are the days that they go out. So if you need children's masks, like I said, we have those as well. So for Board of Health orders, all of the Board of Health orders are still in place. They'll probably be adjusted in the upcoming weeks once we start to kind of see what's going on with the state and to make sure that they're still relevant. But as of now, everything is still in place. They're all on my website. So there's a link at the top that says all current Board of Health orders. And so playgrounds, basketball courts, those are still closed. City-owned parks are closed. And when we say closed, what we mean is the pavilions, gazebos, splash park, pool. But the actual open area of the park is still open. So you can still go jogging, ride your bike, walk your dog on the bike or on the sidewalk. So you can still access them by foot, but the farmers market, there's a farmers market order to ensure safety at the market. We've been working with the farmers market to get that in place. And the order itself and the farmers market, it's pretty strict and they've done a really good job of making sure that's all in place. So that, I believe they open on the 31st, which is next Sunday. So that's going on. Our essential business order is still applicable, and that's for any essential business that is open to the public. So all the businesses that might be opening in the next coming weeks, make sure to take a look at that, because on that order, if there's something that is kind of similar to what the state's guidelines are, you'd have to go with the strictest of the two. So if there's something on my order and there's something on the state's order, and they kind of contradict each other because one's stricter than the other. You'd have to go with the strictest of the two. And state and local requirements for the 10 or less for gatherings is still in place. That does not apply to businesses that are allowed to be open. So hair salons, they do not need to comply with the 10 person or less in their business because they're allowed to be open, just as long as they're complying with the social distancing. But gatherings include, parades, fairs, festivals, funerals, weddings, all that kind of stuff is still in place for the 10 or less. Construction, publicly funded construction projects require a safety plan to be reviewed by the health department, building department, and mayor's office. All other projects that require a permit require the contractor to sign off that he or she will adhere to the COVID safety requirements that were developed by the state and local health department and building department. That document is on the building department website. So anytime if you need to submit a permit for anything, if it's a pool or an addition, even though it's private, you'll have to, either yourself or that your contractor would have to sign off on that. And as for the state reopening, some entities opened on Monday, this past Monday. Some of the major things were churches, gun stores, ranges, manufacturing, etc. This upcoming Monday is the second week of phase 1. There's been some confusion. I think some people think this Monday is the opening of phase 2. But it's actually the second week of phase 1. It's a little confusing. That includes dog grooming, hair salons, barbershops, car washes, and offices at 25% occupancy. The 25% occupancy refers to each specific office, not the entire building. So if your entire building has, an occupancy limit of 150, that doesn't really apply. It applies to your normal occupancy of your office. So like, for example, in my office, we typically have about 2 people in our office at a time. So you go off of your typical occupancy in your office. The phase 2 dates have not been released yet. They're tentatively, Mayor, I believe, 3 weeks after the start of phase 1. However, they could obviously be pushed back given kind of how phase 1 goes. So phase 2 dates are not in concrete yet, but next coming weeks. I did create a fact sheet with all of the following that I'm going to say on it. A lot happened on Monday. It was even overwhelming for me. So I thought by putting it all on like one page would be helpful. Yeah. It has links to basically everything that I'm about to say. So when a business reopens, they should first check to see if there are sector-specific guidelines. So for hair salons, for example, they have specific guidelines. Campgrounds, for example, they have specific guidelines. And then there are also general safety requirements published by the state. So if you don't have a sector-specific guideline, then you'd go by the general requirements, which those 2 links are both on the fact sheet. And in addition to those specific guidelines, the Board of Health order is also another guideline that you have to look at. So of those 3 guidelines, you'd have to go with the strictest of the 3, if that makes sense. And every business that reopens must have a COVID control plan, attestation poster signed and posted, and a worker and employee poster posted. Again, those links are all on the fact sheet, and those are state requirements. These do not need to be sent to the health department for approval, so you don't need to send them to me and say, hey, we're planning on opening on the 25th. Can you look at these? However, if a complaint is received, an inspector will ask to see that these are in place. And the entities right now that can enforce this is the Department of Labor Standards, the Department of Public Health, the local health department, and the police department who were sworn in as health agents. And this fact sheet is on our website. It has info about the phase schedule, so you can actually look. They've posted a good amount of businesses. And so if you are, a tanning salon or I'm trying to think of something that's later, a gym, that's all says which phase you are. And all of the required documents and posters that I just talked about, and then links to the Board of Health order. And there's also a link at the bottom to personal protective equipment vendors, so PPE vendors for masks, gloves. I know that's been a concern for some people about whether or not they'll be able to access that. So there's a huge list of vendors on where to get those. So that's what I've got.
All right. Oh, sorry. I just was looking at the chat. Peter Marks, can you hear? maybe? Okay. Jen and Ryan can, all right. So I just want to add a little bit to what Bree had to say. First of all, the Easthampton Health Department memo that Bree just talked about is really a great resource. It's condensed. It's got all the links you possibly would need about reopening and just general COVID-19 information. Bree, is that document or link to that document on the health department Facebook page too? I know we can get it on the website. Mm-hmm.
When I post our stuff on our Facebook page, I have to post it as a JPEG, so the links won't be live.
Okay.
Way to get it with the live links would be on our website.
Okay, very good, and we'll make sure that that's prominent. First of all, the website that contains all of this, it's a little bit clunky to navigate, but it's mass.gov/reopening, has all of the different metrics and a COVID-19 dashboard. The dashboard and how we go through phases or go back on a phase. There are 6 of them, and it's 1, the COVID-19 positive test rate, 2, number of individuals who died from COVID-19, 3, number of patients with COVID-19 in the hospital, 4, our healthcare system readiness to prepare or to take on a hotspot or a spike upward in infection. Our testing capacity is 5, and there is a drive-through testing site in Northampton at CVS. And also our ability, the 6th one is contact tracing, where if somebody tests positive, then there are folks who interview that person who they were last in contact, and then a trained professional calls those contacts and asks if they have are experiencing symptoms or confirming when they were in contact with the person who's been infected. That's really important. And I would say it's equally, if not a little more important, the contact tracing than testing, because it allows epidemiologists to trace backwards where the infection might have happened, or transmission, or where it didn't, and look at asymptomatic folks as well as symptomatic folks. And it's really a great deal of information. It's how we go forward and decide what activities should be added back into our public functions. The strongest thing I think about this plan, and it was an honor to serve on the advisory board that created the plan with the governor and lieutenant governor, is it clearly marks how we go forward in phases, and that each phase has almost a gate that only opens because of public health metrics. That said, if the public health metrics go up, right, and on the website it literally has green for positive, yellow for cautious but okay, and then red saying not good. And next to each one of those criteria, so the gate to the next phase can be closed, or we can even go back to a phase if we're seeing an uptick in any of the criteria in a negative way. And I think that that's a really strong component of the plan, as well as with those measures, plus making sure our healthcare system can absorb any surge is key, and gives me a great deal of comfort of how we are proceeding. On the building permits, I do want to remind people, I've gotten a couple of calls about what's taken so long for their building permit. A building permit must have that building attestation form that says your contractor, or if you are doing the work, will abide by the safety precautions. So it is the permit form plus the attestation form, and that's on the building inspection webpage on easthamptonma.gov. Very important. Also, sector-specific protocols. So if you are a business or someone who is looking for how a business can open safely, check on that mass.gov / reopening and look at business sector specific protocols, and you'll get an idea of by business sectors what folks have to do. And that can give you a measure of comfort if you're going to do business in that particular sector when it opens or as it does open. Those new documents are being put up literally every day for different industries. So please take a look. If you don't see one up there, that means the business is not yet open in Massachusetts. I will then, I have one question for Bree. With houses of worship, Bree, it's talking about a reduced occupancy, but then when you were talking about funerals and weddings, there's a limit to 10. Can you just explain how that works?
So that question was asked last night, and the person that asked the question actually emailed me this morning before I could look into it. On the sector-specific guidelines for churches, it does include, so it does include funerals that are associated with the church. Sorry, the dog with the toy. So, hold on. Sorry.
The dog lost its toy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Go on. Sorry.
So, if there's a 40% occupancy limit at the church and then they're going to head over to the cemetery, they would be allowed to head over with that occupancy rate that they have at the church. Given that they can socially distance at the cemetery and that the immediate family would be able to, be together, but the rest would have to distance themselves.
Okay, great.
And that's specifically spelled out at the top of the houses of worship guidance for the sector-specific requirements.
Thank you, Bree.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, are there questions in the chat room or?
Yes, got a question from Peter Marks from the chat. Is the city considering loosening temporary zoning restrictions from outdoor dining to allow restaurants and bars in Easthampton to have outdoor zones for the summer?
Yes. So we are looking at that. It won't happen in phase one. So restaurants would have to open, which is scheduled for phase two. Right now, and there are ways to do it. We're waiting for some guidance from the Alcohol Beverage Commission, ABCC. I forget what the second C stands for, to give us that option, and it would go to the local licensing board. We believe, unless there's an executive order that allows it to happen with just an okay, a re-inspection of a site. We just haven't gotten the direction yet, but we expect Boston to take measures to give local control to the city. I expect it to be a guidance sheet that would allow us to do certain things with mayoral authority and maybe a city council vote. We're waiting, but obviously it would need to be an executive order or direction from the state that's really quick to turn around, given we're almost in summer. Bars are not allowed to open until phase 3. And the question would be, so there's a restaurant that has a bar, is the bar closed, but the restaurant serves the alcohol, is one of the questions we put forward. But yeah, we have to look at that. I'll quickly jump to a question I've gotten a lot around this is, and people have sent really great articles about like shutting down Cottage Street or Union Street or a section in between the two. The problem with that has nothing to do with alcohol or zoning. It has to do with the number of detours we already have in the city with the work on Ferry Street and the paving on East Street and a little bit of the congestion out on Park Street. So we're measuring that. So when folks ask me about closing down a part of the downtown corridor, the biggest block to that is the detours. So we're looking at it. I think it's great. I think it's a great idea, and it's anything to help our local businesses and get people outside. And I think it can be done safely. I think there's a way forward.
Does anybody else have any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can ask in the chat and I can read it for you.
I had a question for Bree, actually, and the mayor. I'm an Elk in Northampton, and we have a lot of people from Easthampton that come over, and we've been discussing the car shows, the cruise nights. And that's over 10 people, but we've got a huge parking lot, and we were debating doing social distancing because Dino's already has a permit to serve outside, but that, like you were talking about, food down the road in the summer, we were wondering about if we could social distance outside, but with a limit of only 20%, like I know the zoo is 20% of their capacity. If we had 100 parking spaces, that's only 20 people. And I was hoping for everybody's guidance on that.
So I think at this stage of the game, that would be considered a gathering.
Yeah.
And I think we would just have to wait and see what phase they would start allowing that kind of stuff, like festival, concerts and all that. But right now, there's no specific guidance for that because it hasn't been released yet.
Right. Like Captain Jack's, for example, they've got 10 picnic tables and you've got 4 people at 8, 10 people at a gathering, and they're not gathering, they're gathering at a picnic table, right? So how is that going to work?
Well, Captain Jack's is not going to have any on-site eating. And
oh, no? Okay.
No, I spoke with him this week and did his pre-op inspection, but he's considered essential because he provides food.
Yay.
Yeah, but you still can't have on-site premise eating, so that includes outdoors. So those picnic tables won't be accessible when he opens.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions? Funny anecdotes.
That's good. I can talk a little bit about actually, well, one basic question, and Bree answered it, I think directly. Food trucks in general, will they be licensed by the city, and will we see food trucks, not necessarily like a food truck Friday event, but in different locations because they're just pickup? So like at the farmer's market, or do they have to be in one place like a Captain Jack's?
Was that a question?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So there won't be any events. You're right. Right now we're inspecting trucks that are planning to offer food, not necessarily on a daily basis, but more on a consistent basis, not for any event. So Food Truck Friday would not, happen right now because of the gathering thing. But because they're essential, because they provide food, Captain Jack's is going to be staged in a food truck, actually, providing food every day. And then, there might be a food truck at a different location that's going to be open. So they essentially act as, a takeout curbside restaurant.
Okay.
They have requirements as well, which are on my website, but we took the Board of Health essential order and condensed it for them as well and made it specific for food trucks. So same thing, curbside kind of only, order ahead if you can, and on-site eating. So, because we want to avoid crowding, because I know a lot of times when you go to eat at a food truck, it's most of the time you're going there to hang out afterwards and stuff, and it's just going to be a little bit of a different dynamic right now.
Follow up, or so how when retail is allowed to do curbside, how will that work? How does that work for retail establishment that normally we would browse, like a bookstore or a clothing store?
Yeah, so curbside, the technical definition from the state is really no human contact at all. So, example, I always bring it back to Tandem because of the way they do it is you call ahead or you order ahead online and you get up to the door and they, crack the door open, they get your name and they close the door, they get your food and then they open the door, they place it on a table, they close the door and then you pick it up. You really want to avoid kind of like face-to-face handing products off. I know that might be difficult. But, so for retail stores, I know it's difficult because a lot of people need to browse and look around, but for now, there is no browsing, there's no in-store shopping. So that might be difficult for stores that you need to browse in, but they are allowed to, post on their Facebook, post on their website, any of their inventory, and go from there.
Great. So how does curbside work for retail marijuana dispensaries?
That I
know. Right now, Bree is like, really, Mayor? Yeah.
I would defer probably to Jeff or the chief just because they're, really like on that right now. I really am not that up to speed with the CCC because we typically deal with marijuana. I don't know if anyone's on the call that wants to answer that either planner or chief, but the CCC has specific guidelines for them. There he is.
There he is.
So we're actually in the middle of that right now, as both Bree and the mayor are aware, with both Canna Provisions on Cottage Street and INSA. Matter of fact, I just received the final opening plan for Canna Provisions, which I'm about to go through. That's next on my agenda list today. And the CCC have given guidance, but the guidance is confusing at best. So I know that both Canna Provisions and INSTA were both going back to CCC to get some additional guidance or clarification on curbside pickup versus ordering, very much like Bree just explained. So I don't have a definitive answer as of yet because we're still looking for some clarification from the CCC.
Great. Thank you. Now that I know that you're here, Chief Alberti, right. Get a different screen name. So, and I just, I'll make a clarifying statement. So, wearing a face covering or a mask plus 6 feet social distancing, that is the guidance. It's not either or. Is that correct, Bree?
Well, it depends on where you're at. If you're inside of a retail store, you have to wear it no matter what. If you're out and about on the bike path and you can maintain social distancing or you're at Nonotuck Park, you wouldn't. But we do recommend bringing it with you, kind of like how Chief has his. And then if you do come across somebody, you can put it on real quick.
Nice.
Because the bike path is small. I mean, and it's crowded, especially this weekend. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. So in retail stores, though, like Big E's or convenience stores, you have to wear it even if you can maintain social distancing. So if you go late at night and there's really no one in the store, you still have to have it on. But out in open areas like parks and such, if you're by yourself, you don't need to have it. If you go for a hike in the woods, you don't have to have it. But we really recommend bringing it with you, because especially on places like the park and the bike path, because you're going to run into somebody and you need to have it.
And even if you're passing them on a bike or running by them, I mean, it is recommended, highly recommended, that you have a mask on as you're passing folks.
I mean, I think that's good courtesy as well. So, I would say if you're by yourself on the bike path, you're fine. But when you're about to cross someone, just put it up real quick and take it off once you pass them.
Great. So with both health and police on this virtual town hall, what about enforcement? We've heard a lot about enforcement. I get a lot of calls saying so-and-so is not wearing a mask on the bike path. Can we ticket them? Or my neighbor is having a gathering of 20 people and they're in a big circle, but it's 20 people. how are we going to enforce that as a community? How does that work from the health department perspective and the police department's perspective?
Bree, you want to touch on the difference between private property and public property, particularly outside?
Yeah, so private property is tough for us to enforce because, we do have to kind of go back to people's rights, and we can't barge in on someone's private property. So those ones are difficult to enforce. If it's, down at Nashwanik Pond and on the boardwalk and there's, for some reason, some big gathering, then 100% we would be able to enforce that.
Okay.
And, I don't know, Chief.
I didn't realize that. Okay, great.
Yeah,
that's been a bone of contention. Some of it could very much like the mayor's office, and I'm sure like Bree's office, we're getting complaints of people not adhering to the governor's orders, and there's a lot of confusion around. To the mayor's point earlier, 6 feet with or without a mask, if you can maintain 6 feet, and what is we've had a lot of discussion as of late is what is contact as well. Within 6 feet for a 15-minute period or more would be considered contact. So the same thing. We fielded plenty of these calls, and one of the confusing parts is somebody's having a party in their backyard. They're having a bonfire, by way of example. They got a fire permit for it, but they have a bonfire, and there's 15 or 20 people there. It's unenforceable. For us, because they're on private property versus public property.
Gotcha. And
yeah, I have a question. Memorial Day is coming up on Monday, and I know that's a big family gathering day. Is it recommended, if you don't live in the same household as family members, is it still recommended to stay apart from them?
Yes, 100%. Yep. And then back to the mayor's comment about enforcement. The police department has also had some officers on the weekends doing details with handing out masks. So we're trying to, obviously ticketing is always going to be the last resort.
Right.
That's what I always tell people. If say you're not wearing a mask, an officer's not just going to come up to you and hand you a ticket. They're going to first start with a conversation. And then
hand you a mask first.
Yeah. Give them the mask and then have the conversation. But we haven't had to ticket anyone, and I really don't think that's not. It seems like most people have reacted well to getting the mask, and we're trying to give them the tools they need to succeed rather than just giving them a ticket. It doesn't really solve anything by ticketing people. Mm-hmm. However, of course, if we have business in town that absolutely refuses, we might have to go down that road, but we've been pretty successful with diffusing those situations.
And we will have the same walking / bicycle patrols out this weekend. Actually, Saturday, Sunday, and we're going to do it on Monday as well.
Okay. Great. Chief, so speaking of the long weekend, and we know with the boat ramp over on Route 5, social distancing on water and boats. Can you address that? And
yeah, sure. Yeah, happily. We've actually gotten some guidance from our friends at the Mass Environmental Police, who are part of our task force with regard to the Connecticut River Task Force and the boat ramp.
Yeah.
Essentially, on the river, they're allowing folks that live in the same household to be on the same boat, but they're highly recommending and to some degree sanctioning folks, if they can figure out who's from what household, that are not supposed to be on the same boat together. Boating could be the great example of social distancing. If you're on a boat out in the middle of the river by yourself or with your people that live in your house, it's great social distancing. You're definitely gonna stay 6 feet apart.
Right.
The boat ramp's a little different. The boat ramp, we're gonna be down there all weekend. We suspect that it's going to be very busy, and as most people know, the Easthampton Route 5 boat ramp is the busiest one. Actually, it was the busiest state boat ramp in the state. So we suspect it'll be crazy busy down there this weekend, and we'll do our best, along with the EPOs, the environmental police officers, to ensure that people are staying away from each other while they're launching their boats. We've got parking pretty well controlled. We've got areas sealed off from parking, and we'll be down there ticketing violators for sure. Because we got to set the bar early in the voting season, set the bar high, and make sure that they know that we're going to be down there and that we're going to be enforcing. I know I heard this morning that the Oxbow's Marina had their record day in their business on Tuesday. They've sold more boats on Tuesday than they ever have in their ever being open. Kind of what that speaks to is folks aren't traveling, not taking vacations. So a lot of people are saying, well, we'll buy a boat then and spend the summer on the river. So we expect that to be a very busy and crazy place this summer.
Great. Thank you very much for that overview. So I just want to pivot a little bit to, not a little bit. So while we're clearly still fighting back the pandemic, we're also getting ready to move forward and stabilize as much as we can the local economy, but just the sense of community and connection that we were also used to 4 months ago. And I've created 3 working groups. One is focused on reimbursement and identifying grant money, not only for the city, but for businesses and for residents. Really proud to announce or re-announce that the Community Protection Act committee is moving forward on a rent relief program for Easthampton residents. They're proposing to put together $300,000 out of our CPA funds and create a program where folks can apply for rent relief as they need it. If anyone saw the unemployment numbers this morning nationally, they're really growing to recession and in some cases, Great Depression levels. And we know that's affecting people all over Easthampton. And I can't thank the CPA committee enough for putting that program together for our residents. And the reimbursement and grant committee will continue to look for those types of relief mechanisms for our residents and small businesses. Certainly my office would love to get any suggestions or things that people know about around grant monies. The second one is a reopening committee. The reopening committee will create a survey and distribute it widely. And I'll be asking for everyone's help to get these surveys to as many people as possible around their confidence for doing business in Easthampton, for businesses, what they need to do business, what's going on, how they're feeling overall about the business community, the arts community in Easthampton. And then we'll redistribute that survey, every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. So we're comparing apples to apples over the course of time. And I would expect that survey data, just so people understand how long this phased approach to reopening statewide and in Easthampton is going to be. We're talking at least until the end of 2020, and very, very likely past that. So I to just give you an idea. So we really want to know from the business community and residents how they're feeling about the services in the city and what help those services need to really keep standing through this unprecedented time. And then the third one is more about reinventing and innovation in Easthampton, how businesses are pivoting and getting them resources and possibly some funding or technical support to reimagine, reinvent, and innovate their businesses. A great example of that is what Big E's has done inside the store. Every time I go in, there's something new to make the store and the experience more safe. And we want to make sure that every business in Easthampton, or somebody who's thinking of creating a business in Easthampton, has the resources to really think broadly about how they can be successful, or if they're currently closed, when they reopen, what are other ways they can look at their business model so they may survive this dramatic economic downturn. So you'll hear more about those 3 groups in the next couple of days. I was hoping to get them more officially up and on the ground by today. And, pandemic things happened, and I'm a little behind the 8 ball. And on top of that, we are still going through with our formal budget process. It is on time, on track, for full consideration by the City Council in the first meeting in June. We will have budget hearings tonight. We've already had some budget hearings tonight, and I believe all of those budget hearings, Brian, they're on Easthampton Media. Can people watch the subcommittee, finance subcommittee meetings?
I think so.
Okay, and then so we have tonight is tonight will be general government. We'll look over that. Last Tuesday we looked at education and debt and interest. There will be a full review in May 26th. Now I'm getting shaky on dates, but the dates are on the website. And certainly if people have questions about how to tune in or what day a certain hearing is on or the budget process, please email mayor@easthamptonma.gov. In my next town hall, we'll have, I'll put forward a budget overview of just what the budget looks like, what the forecast mechanisms that we're using to just try to project what's going to happen economically. And it's really just a moving target, but I want to make sure everybody out in Easthampton and the wider community understands my approach to the budget and also my approach to the changing factors that will affect us economically from federal and state aid and what money we can access for COVID-19 expenses. I have to commend every single city department. They really, put the pencil to the paper and got their budgets bare bones. We are maintaining services. We are taking care of dramatic deficits or repair and maintenance that must be taken care of. We don't want to come out of this way behind, but while we're in it, the dollars we spend must be essential and they must be proven to save or have a bigger savings long-term for the city if they're going to be spent now. So we'll go over that in a future town hall. I think it's next week. So I wanted to get that in. I think I saw a question, Ryan. Are there more questions?
I got 2 questions in the chat. First, Owen Zarrett would like to know, regarding boating, are there any restrictions to boating on the pond at this time?
No.
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 The same restrictions they are, right? I mean,
Right.
you can't have a motor, right?
Okay. And Peter Marks would like to know, is there a schedule to join the Zoom meeting for the school committee? I have not been able to find information on the easthamptonma.gov website or the school page.
It should be on, if you go to easthamptonma.gov, go to agenda and meetings, you should be able to click on school committee, and in the agenda, the Zoom link is supposed to be right in the agenda. It's a hot link right in the middle of the agenda. And if that is not the case or you still can't find it, shoot me an email at mayor@easthamptonma.gov and we'll correct that. I know that there was some difficulty. It wasn't super clear how to get to the recorded school committee meetings, and I think we've addressed that. But yeah, that's where they should be. And if they're not, Peter, please let me know, and we'll fix that and make it more prominent going forward. I will say quickly about the school project. The steel is in, and they're starting to erect the steel. So it's going upward. There has been some benefit to not having school in session. We're able to get traffic in and out of there safer. And we've made up some time from the period that we had to close for a little while. It's quite impressive. Really, really exciting to see that happen. And One Ferry Street is open. back open to construction, and things are going down and they're working on a wall. And River Valley is back working again, shovels in the ground. And you're going to see some traffic deviation there once we start working on Route 10 and doing a turning lane on Route 10 into the market, and then straightening Lyman Road so it comes straight onto Route 10, and helping that to be a little more safer for people to get on and off Route 10. And there's elections. So Easthampton, we should be very proud of ourselves. We had a special election on Tuesday. We had about 19% turnout. 9% of that was mail-in vote. It was exceptional turnout compared to other cities around us. I think Holyoke was around 8%. And a huge thanks and just shout out to our city clerk, Barbara LaBombard, her election poll workers, our assistant clerk, Marianne, for really opening and allowing unfettered access to people voting in, again, just unprecedented times, and to have to rearrange voting and make sure everybody can get a ballot on such quick notice for a special election. Very impressive. And the fact that, yet again, Easthampton came out so strong to vote in a one-off election. So that's great. And Barbara and her election crew is already preparing and thinking about September's primary and then November's election as well. Other questions, comments?
Is there anybody that has a question that would like to unmute their microphone? That's the end of everything in the chat right now. So if there are any burning questions, this would be the time. All right. Any closing statements? Anything else that either of you guys would like to add?
I mean, I guess the thing I just want to make sure everybody understands. So if there are questions about what is mandated or what a business is supposed to have or do around operations, or what somebody sees on like the bike path or not masked, Bree and Chief, how do they get that question answered? And if there's something concerning, who do they call? Or how best? And I think especially I asked that question as we're going into a long weekend.
So for general questions about businesses, I would ask that everyone look at that fact sheet. And then if they have questions beyond that, then they can ask me. But the fact sheet really, it guides everyone to every link that they're going to most likely need, like the guidelines for opening, all of the required posters and plans that they have to fill out. As for general complaints, I don't know if Chief, you want to talk about
any general complaints or questions beyond what's on the fact sheet that Bree was speaking of. Folks are always welcome to call the police station, the business line at 413-527-1212. Our dispatch center is manned 24/7, as everyone knows. And feel free to give us a call. And if you guys have general questions, we're happy to answer them.
Great. And if people want to drop off masks or personal protection equipment for the use by either public safety or to have it distributed through our health department, the drop-off point is the public safety lobby at 32 Payson Ave.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Last round for question or comments.
I have one question.
Morning.
Good morning. You mentioned the CPA program with the $300,000 rent relief.
Yep.
That's really great to hear and encouraging.
Yes.
Is that relief available to residential rent only, or is that also available to businesses? I know that.
They're looking into that. We expect the formal proposal from the CPA committee, I think for next city council meeting. And that was actually a question I had. And they're working with the CPA coalition out in Boston to obviously make that money available to as many renters, residential and commercial, as possible. And certainly once we get that answer, we'll get that out to the public. But I'm certainly hoping we can apply it to commercial as well. You think about the creative economy, but just also small businesses, right? And the help that they would need. I know the initial plan I read when it was going to CPA also included the opportunity for help with back rent. So a lot of landlords are giving folks some time to pay rent or partial rent. So the original proposal too was to help with back rent, and that had to be vetted by the CPA coalition. And Jamie Webb, our assistant planner, has a great relationship with them. So we'll see a fully formed proposal, I would say, in the next week, but certainly something I am pushing for on the commercial as well as residential. Super important.
Great, thank you. And I just had one other question about related to that. I was just wondering if there was any sort of mortgage relief programs in the works. I know we rent over at Keystone, and Jim and Aaron Whitmer have been very generous there. They've cut everybody's rent in half for the last 2 months, and I know that that's difficult for them to do.
Yeah,
and I think that would be a great program to pursue to not just address the renters, but also the landlords who have gone out of their way to be accommodating.
So we, when we first started looking at the CPA money, it's you can't use it for mortgages. So that was one, because that was the general. At first, we're like, okay, we have housing money for CPA. Let's help renter and mortgage holders. And we know very clearly that we can't use it for mortgages. That said, we have been talking to the local banks about just giving people a pause, like 90 days, and maybe forbearance, and attaching that to the end of the mortgage without interest. The mortgage relief programs that we're now looking at are CARE Act money. And is there a way to use our CARE Act money for not just COVID-related reimbursement, but community related reimbursement, with the state or a regional organization being the distributor, somebody like Community Action up in Greenfield, or Pioneer Valley Planning Commission would be, or the Pioneer Valley CDC. We're waiting for a little more explanation on what we can use for reimbursement and what we can use for what I call revenue replacement. I do think some relief is coming. I don't know the details yet. We're waiting for guidance, honestly, to see what we can get reimbursed for COVID-19. In talking to folks down in Washington, the HEROES Act is really promising for that, because the money would come directly to municipalities to be able to do what they need to do for their communities. And this one, and I know Oxbow, I know you guys over at Oxbow will be a part of this reopening committee, and the survey questions is to figure out what people need, and if it's mortgage, business mortgage and whatnot, and then we can direct funds or go after funds. There are a couple of foundations that are working with the Boston Foundation and the Community Foundation for mortgage relief, putting things together for creative businesses. Right now they're helping not-for-profits, but hoping that are doing essential services, but pushing that into what's called micro businesses, small businesses, and Main Street businesses. So actually it's small businesses, Main Street businesses, micro businesses. So there are things on the horizon. My fear is people are on the edge now. I don't know if it'll be in time. I think it's fair to say, not being too dramatic, that I feel pretty okay that help and assistance is coming, but I don't know if it's going to be in time for all of our businesses and mortgage holders. Foreclosures are on hold right now. But there are some deep holes to dig out of, and that money coming forward, like the rent, needs to help for what has happened, as well as, going forward. We need to make sure as many people, all of us, are standing during this so we can step forward at the end. And it's hard.
Thank you,
Very
Mayor.
hard.
It's all very useful.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything else? What do we got, Ryan?
Nothing else in the chat. I'll give everybody one last opportunity if they have anything to speak about. If they have any more questions for the mayor or the chief. All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Bree.
Cover your
Thank you.
face.
For coming and participating, and we will see you all at the next one. Have a great weekend.
Thank
You
you.
too. Everybody be safe. Cover your nose and your mouth. Or stay home. Even better yet.